first episode of the Truthy Truth Cast. I'm Matt, and this is my wife Katie. We're your host. On today's episode, we're going to be going over Mask, Church, and Romans 13. I'm not sure that's the order, but those three topics.
Those topics in a different order.
But first, we're going to try and start off with a segment where we're going over some of our favorite social media posts of the week.
My favorite.
My favorite is this one from the National Museum of African American History or something to that effect, where they talk about these like graphics, three graphics. They talk about these aspects and assumptions of whiteness and white culture, and I will put this up so you can see it. Aspects and assumptions of whiteness and white culture in the United States. It includes such things as following rigid time schedules, planning for the future, Christianity as the norm, delayed gratification, justice system that protects property and entitlements, and communication, written tradition, avoid conflict, be polite, all these very terrible things.
Wait. Having good manners is a white thing?
No,
that's interesting.
Mm-hmm. Okay, yeah, that's mine. I don't know if you've picked one or not. You have to use your phone. This is my phone.
I'm stealing your phone because I forgot my phone. And I haven't saved it like you have. But basically all of this, like holidays based on white history and male leaders, do they realize? But this is the same group that goes on over the fact that Jesus wasn't a white man. And here we have them saying that holidays are about white male leaders and white history, and that is kind of an oxymoron there, inconsistency rather. Rugged individualism, self-reliance, family structure, father, mother, and two or more children as the ideal social unit. Last I checked, having a mother and father is ideal for various reasons, but maybe we'll do that in another Truthy Truth cast. But yeah, the history classes I took as being homeschooled, it was not based on just Europe. Europe was part of it, but I also learned Asian history. I learned Indian history. I learned Central and South American history. So, I don't know, maybe they should start homeschooling.
I would say the cultures that we read about and study the most are those who actually left stuff behind for us to read. We can only discern so much from your pottery and everything like that, so I've read history books that are based exclusively on archaeological digs, and they are boring. But anyway,
according to you, I find them fascinating.
No, they really are. All they do is just describe when they think this particular piece of pottery or building or structure, whatever, was dated to, and they don't make any conclusions. All they do is basically catalog it.
Okay, but sometimes they're pretty.
Sometimes it doesn't tell you anything. Anyway,
that is up to his opinion. It's not my opinion.
You can tell us in the comments who you agree with. If you think that.
If you agree with him, you can be wrong. I mean.
Anyway. Alright, so transition to
our main topic.
Let me grab this from you. Alright, so our main topic today is meeting as a body. So we're talking about the church and meeting as a body. We got a couple of questions here we're going to kind of use to spring off of. Just as a background, Governor Newsom has recently banned outdoor church gatherings in California indefinitely due to the spiking coronavirus. And apparently this also includes like home gatherings, so you can't get away with having friends over to your house either. So they're coming after that. So the question keeps coming down is, well, Romans 13, you got to obey the government, you know. And when you try to challenge that with, well, not when the government requires you to do what's unbiblical, first thing, just two things you tend to run into. You run into people who will say, well, it's not, well, we'll deal with this in a minute, but we can just do virtual church and still honor God's command, which is complete bogus. And then there's those who say, well, but we're not actually being persecuted. We're being asked to do this for society's good to help the virus numbers go down. So the first question is, when does persecution become persecution? And I could do a whole thing. We could do a whole thing about what persecution actually is about, because I could actually go. I would love to go into the whole idea that persecution and martyrdom biblically are very different from our concepts of it. That more of our concepts are actually just Roman Catholic hagiography and like this sort of almost penance model, as opposed to being shot at while in combat. But when does it become persecution? And I think the answer to that is when, first off, the fact that it's indefinite, like there's no given limit to it. Second, you gotta know who it's coming from. I mean, do you actually expect that somebody like Newsom, who is an openly godless ruler, actually has the church's best interest in mind? Do you actually think that he wouldn't want to use this for his own benefit of not having churches meet? And I mean, it's the government telling the church how to run their business. I would say that that's persecution in that, it's not them standing there at the door saying, you're a Christian, I'm going to kill you, but it is saying, we have deemed that the practice of your faith is not essential, because while you may believe it's true, we, this government, are determining that it's not true, and therefore you cannot practice your fantasy, whatever you want to call it, during this time. So basically it's saying you have to step out of your fantasy world into the real world during this time. And so they're basically challenging the validity of the Christian faith, because if you really believe that our faith is true, then we need to be meeting, we need to be having church, we need to not be forsaking the assembly, we need to gather with the brethren, and we need to actually be worshiping, we need to be singing, because that's a strong biblical theme.
Yes, singing, despite, what singing is essential. I'm just putting that out as an aside.
I know some of y'all can't sing, but you should do it anyway. It says make a joyful noise, not a tuneful noise. Okay.
Is tuneful a word? I don't think it is.
Tuneful. Full of tune. So then we have, why can't we just do virtual church? That's the next one. Well, why can't we just keep doing it online? That's what a lot of churches are doing. I would just say practically, we did that with the church we were at for a little while. It just wasn't the same. You don't have that accountability to watch it, for one thing. It's really easy to go like, well, nobody will know if I don't watch it this Sunday. And actually, a lot of pastors said that they saw their stats dropping. Like the first couple weeks, people were, real into it, watching it, and then it starts to drop. The other issue is it's not fulfilling the first, because church isn't just about hearing a sermon. That's one of the biggest issues that we as Protestants need to get over. It's not about just hearing a sermon. If it was, then yeah, there wouldn't be need for a local church. We could all just listen to Doug Wilson and R.C. Sproul's sermons. Although if you all listen to Doug Wilson's sermons, that would actually probably do you some good. Yeah.
But on your own time, don't replace that.
Right. But yeah, we can't really do the virtual church service is not a substitute, because you're not interacting in a meaningful way with other believers. You're not building your local community. You're not strengthening each other. You're not building those connections. We're not singing together. We're not making a beautiful sound, even if some of us can't sing.
I keep coming back to that. Are you saying something about me?
No, I'm just assuming there's that one person watching this.
Well, I can't sing anyway.
So really the only, and I think this actually has exposed a lot of people who just do church for like consumer purposes, and they're perfectly happy to spend the rest of their Sundays on the couch eating Cheetos, watching Pastor Bob do his sermon, and then they're done.
And kind of piggybacking off of that, just togetherness is important. I mean, and that's not just for extroverts. That's for the introverts too. This is for the whole body. There's a reason we aren't the Lone Ranger. We weren't called to be the Lone Ranger. We were called to be the body, the church. So being together does not just, it not only feels good, it feels good because it's what we should be doing, and there's a clear biblical mandate for it. Paul says, forsake not the assembly. Assembly clearly means an in-person gathering. If they had Zoom back then, I'm pretty sure Paul would have still said, do not forsake the assembly.
Mm-hmm. And of course, there's also the biggest part of why you can't do virtual church, and that is you cannot have a meaningful communion service. And I would argue that you actually don't have a full worship service, or a full, whatever you want to call it. I really don't like the term worship service. It's not actually that biblical, but you don't have a full worship pattern if it doesn't conclude with the Lord's Supper. And I understand sometimes you can't do it in some churches. They may not have an elder there present or any kind of leadership present to do it. I get that.
You should, but
you might be a church plant. We're in a church plant right now that doesn't have an elder, and that's we can't.
We're being assigned one.
But we still have a spot in our liturgy where we would have it, and we do instead. We pray for our fellowship meal to try and at least establish the pattern. So we need to be having communion, and whatever it is you're trying to do virtually is not a substitute, and it's honestly, I think it is a gross violation of the third commandment. And that I think it's a blasphemous attempt to just kind of get around the whole concept of communion, even.
And I think that the church being okay with the being separate, being separate during worship, is actually from some modern and some not so modern philosophers, secular philosophers, who hyped up individualism. Now, we are all unique. We are all our own individual. However, we, especially in today's culture, it's become very, very blatant. I'm the lone basically the lone ranger mentality of, I can do whatever I want and nobody can stop me. And, I can do this alone if I need to. Well, we can't do this alone. We weren't called to do this alone. We aren't supposed to do this alone.
Yeah. We're about to run out of time on this segment, but we'll say real quick on that. Individualism is fantastic on a legal level. It is a phenomenal disaster on a theological level. So the last thing we'll go over is kind of just practical here. How do you rebel? How do we can't all just hop in an X-Wing and go shoot the Death Star. So I'd say first off, the biggest thing is if you're in a church that is quite clearly not responding to this in a biblical way at this point, if your church is doing things such as continuing to still meet virtually, you need to be leaving that church and finding a church that's meeting in person. If your church is doing, I don't honestly argue if they're taking in their if they're meeting in person, but they're doing over the top Corona measures,
social distancing. If you come within 6 feet of a person, you're a murderer.
I think you need to definitely be consider leaving. And you might be an issue where what if none of the churches in your area are meeting? What do you do? And I can't give you an answer on that totally. Find believers who believe like you do, Pray for God to open doors.
Maybe you need to start your own church plant.
If you can find some people who are qualified to lead and you can be accountable to other eldership somewhere, that's definitely something you should consider. Um, if you live close to a border and the state beside you is not closed, you might need to consider going across the border for a little while.
We may or may not be doing that for grocery shopping right now.
And we'll skip this last point because we already went over that.
Yes, I skipped ahead. My bad.
So we're still we have the format of this thing laid out, but we're still working on actually making an episode with all those parts on it because there's a lot of some of this. This is where we would be transitioning to our hymn of the week. The idea behind that's what I'll do for this is I'll just kind of give an idea of what we're trying to do. We want to start bringing to y'all's attention various obscure hymns, metric psalms, etc., so that we can start kind of just because I'm one of these people. It's one of my hobbies. I like to get on like hymnary.org and I just like look up all these old obscure hymns that have these amazing lyrics. And then I'm like, but we never sing these. What do we do with it? So I'm figuring let's just share it with y'all. And if you try to make resources available, if you are in a position of musical leadership in your church, you can use these songs, or if you just want to use them in family devotion, whatever you want to do with them. But just kind of bringing them out of where they are and saying, hey, these exist, and they're probably a lot better than what you've been singing. Anyway.
Oh, this isn't a hot button topic at all.
All right, so let's move on to our second topic. Kind of coming back to the Romans 13 as our overarching issue, but talking about masks. So the basic argument from the pro-maskers, I'm going to try to be gracious here, is that since masks help reduce, not stop entirely, but masks help reduce the transmission of COVID-19 in situations where social distancing is not possible, we should all be wearing masks to help reduce the transmissions so that the numbers go down and we're able to return to normalcy. But nobody is really defining any of like what is down enough. So for example, suppose we do get the numbers down. People aren't getting coronavirus. Above a small insignificant percentage. But as long as even one person is still getting it, only takes that one person to walk into a grocery store without their mask
and infect everybody in it.
Right, which is so basically, we're waiting for a vaccine, which all the whatever on that aside,
which will literally be as effective as trying to find a vaccine for the common cold.
The flu vaccine every year comes out and it still has. It doesn't have a 100% success rate.
I don't.
And again, all it takes is that one. Since Corona is supposedly so, contagious, all it takes is that one person to walk into a crowded Walmart, and there we go. So I don't even think that waiting until the vaccine is an acceptable answer because that's not going to do anything either. Like ultimately towards eradicating it. Again, all these things are simply going to reduce it, but apparently reducing it doesn't do any good because it's so contagious and we don't have herd immunity. Well, I'm not a scientist, but I'm pretty sure the way you build herd immunity is when people have to contract it.
And the vast majority of cases, they're saying, and this is like, I want to say this is from either the WHO or the CDC. So they're saying as much as 94% of the people who get COVID-19 are asymptomatic. 94%.
Mm-hmm. So really, and I will also clarify, I understand that the point of the mask is not to prevent just pure air from passing, because if that was the case, it's clearly ludicrous. But what I'm hearing is the point of the mask is that it's supposed to prevent micro droplets. So basically, you know how when you're you sneeze or you cough and there's little bits of droplets and spit, that's what it's trying to prevent. But actually, sneezing or coughing into your elbow You're not going to be having that on your mouth all over your, nose, and if you're like me, and you have a beard or whatever, all over your face for the next hour. Um, if you sneeze, it goes into your poop of your arm. It doesn't spread out. You're usually fine. That's what we
Basically,
all grown up.
practice good hygiene.
Um, but I still want someone to explain to me why in March we were told, hey, mask really, you have to wear a specific kind of mask to actually prevent the transmission, to reduce the transmission. Please reserve those for medical professionals because they need those in surgeries. They don't really wear those like for very long in surgeries. They wear those long enough to do what they're doing, and then they dispose of them in a proper manner.
Even longer surgeries, they take a break every 30 minutes.
Mhm.
That's a lot of times why.
I mean,
That's why
if
these
you've ever been in a
surgeries take
hospital,
so
they walk in
long.
and out. They always change stuff out. So it doesn't matter if they've touched anything with their gloves or anything or not. They always pull them off, throw them in the trash can, pump the hand sanitizer, and walk out. And they often will not even actually touch door handles of like hit it with their elbow and slide out. Um, so we're not using the mask the way that would actually be somewhat effective, which is clearly the point of the mask is just to be a social band-aid. Because governments know right now that there's nothing they can really do aside from shutting down the economy again, which they don't. Most of them don't want to do that because they know that that would just not be good in the long run. So instead, to get people to at least believe something is being done, they're mandating masks because they figure, oh, that's harmless enough. Except that it's not, because if you're having to wear one, say, at your work, I was having to wear one in a warehouse setting. And I want you to imagine wearing a cloth mask, or any mask for that matter, for 10 hours a day in a warehouse with no climate control.
And I'm sure some of you can.
And it's, that's not helping me.
In addition, the masks have become a
the test of your social goodness is supposed to show how much you care about people.
which is
You
really
just want
interesting.
people to die if you don't wear
Exactly.
a mask.
Which is really interesting because a lot of people, I mean, I have at least more than one close friend who has gone to the store and they have a medical reason for not wearing a mask. Like this particular person carries a doctor's note with them that says under no circumstances should they wear a mask, and people have yelled out to them, um, telling them that they hope they die from COVID-19 for not wearing a mask, even though it is an extreme detriment to their health to wear a mask. So even if you are 100% for masks, we're not necessarily trying to change your mind. We're just trying to kind of just maybe rationalize. Um, and even if you are 100% for masks, give grace to those who physically cannot wear masks. There are people with PTSD, people with autism, people with SPD, um, people with asthma. I mean, I know people who are experiencing respiratory failure symptoms for because they have to wear a mask for so long every day.
So that brings us. I do want to talk about because we're running a little bit low on time here, but kind of skip to two things here. First off, is what about Romans 13 again? And the argument would be because Romans 13 tells us to obey the government as long as it doesn't require us to do something that God forbids or require us to keep us from doing something God expressly commands, that we should try to accommodate the government and obey it as far as we can. So the argument is, well, even if you do think the masks are stupid and don't work, there's still nothing biblical that says it's a sin to wear a mask or that God requires you not to wear a mask. And what I would say is at that point you're kind of missing the forest for the trees a little bit. No, I mean there's not a verse that says thou shalt not wear a mask. But just to kind of use an example, the Bible also doesn't say thou shalt not ever under any circumstances bow down. I mean, there are actually biblical commands to bow down. But why do Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego not bow down is because It's a matter of appearance. At that point, it's a matter of publicly saying we're not in agreement with the intent of this bowing down, which was to worship the statue of Nebuchadnezzar, which wasn't technically, it never describes it fully as like an idol, it's just a statue. So the bowing down is not described in terms of worship so much as it's like a paying homage. So in wearing a mask, you are saying that I assent to the prevailing ideology of fear surrounding this coronavirus. It's not explicit, but the underlying philosophy of the mask is clearly anti-biblical. It's saying, wear this as a arbitrary test of your social goodness, when it's not a true test of that. It's saying wear this as a sign of, I believe, unquestioningly in a science that has already shown itself to be contradicting. And so I think that while I don't think you're in sin if you do wear the mask entirely, I do think that you need to at least be considering it. I think that it's definitely a case for not wearing the mask in a way that doesn't violate the commands of Romans 13. So 2 points then. Did you have anything you want to say on that? On Romans 13? Or did I kind of...
I think you covered everything.
Okay. So then a point and a sub-point. Again, how do you practically rebel against the mask orders? Because in a lot of places there's fines. Right, so where we are, there's a $500 fine, potential for imprisonment. So again,
does
practically
that not
speaking,
sound ridiculous to some
practically
people?
speaking, if you live where you can go across the border, like we are, to a state that doesn't require a mask, we do our grocery shopping 50-something minutes away, because 45 to 50 minutes away, because you don't have to wear a mask in Tennessee, so we go to the border. If you don't have that luxury, if you don't live close to a border, or you're surrounded by states that are just as wacky as yours right now, do what you have to do. If you have to wear a mask to go grocery shopping, do it, but make it clear that you're not complying out of agreement. Toby Sumter talked about that.
You can do this.
I've been advocating for, we need to start making like these headgears that like normally just drape it in the back, like a head turban, like biblical, and it drapes in the back, and then when you go into a store, you just turn it around, and like the back part is over your face,
like a shower curtain.
And then you walk in, and you pull it right back around. So I think Toby Sumter called it cheerful non-compliance, where just basically make yourself difficult, even as you technically comply. And if there are any exceptions that are allowed, obviously make full use of those.
Because these places of business also need to know that this isn't okay with their customer base.
Because if they know that, they're going to start putting the pressure on governments to start, moving it. So vote with your feet if you can. If not, vote with your attitudes. And then here's another question. Is it biblical to flee? This is my sub-point. Is it biblical to flee persecution? So let's say, and all of this kind of goes back to the whole churches being banned, and say there's not any churches in your area that are being faithful and still meeting in a way that is biblical. And say that you can tell that's going to last for a significant amount of time, like say a year to a couple of years. Do you at any point have a biblical foundation for fleeing? Because again, getting back to kind of what I was touching on a little bit with the whole kind of glorification of martyrdom and persecution that comes from Catholicism. There's also the idea that you can't flee from persecution, because when it comes to you, it's almost this sort of, oh, God has graced you with persecution, how could you possibly flee it? Well, for one thing, we actually have a biblical example where an angel comes to Joseph and literally says, flee. We know that Jesus could not sin, and Jesus fled persecution in that instance.
Paul fled persecution.
Jesus fled persecution in the Gospel of John when they were going to throw him off the cliff. He purposely would avoided certain areas at times.
Peter was freed from the prison. But wait, wasn't that an opportunity for him to be persecuted?
Mhm.
I mean, an angel told him to flee the prison. He fled the prison. There are certain situations where the right thing to do is flee.
I say, especially if you have a family, you need to consider moving to a state that's friendly. I would say that if you do it though, try to talk with any friends that you have locally who are of similar mindsets and flee together. Don't just randomly scatter. Like, say, if you and several of your friends from your church are unhappy with how your church is doing things, get together, say, hey, we want to move to this area together. We're going to do this if it's possible. And sometimes it's not. But you should definitely, something you can pray about and ask, how do we do this? And that kind of goes back to the principle of voting with your feet if you can. And it's not going to be a temporary move. You can make it clear you're gonna come back if and when this ever ends. Yes, maybe we all end up in Georgia, but there are worse states we could all end up in, and I'm not going to mention any of them by name, like Michigan. But
sorry, Michiganders.
All right, I think that.
Wait, does that mean females from Michigan are Michigese?
Sure.
I just had that realization.
I am perfectly fine with calling the governess of Michigan a Michigese. All right, so I think that pretty much covers our topics. We're kind of running over our self-allotted time frame, but this is also a first episode, so it's whatever. This is we're going to find some funny headlines to share with you, but we kind of got on that a little bit late. So in the future, we're going to conclude with some funny headlines. The only one I can think of off the top of my head is one I just saw a few minutes ago about Kanye West tweeting a picture of Mount Rushmore with his face photoshopped into it. So majorly sad that he is no longer running. So
you are.
I'm just saying.
I was worried about all the people who were actually going to vote for him.
No comment. Alright. Well, thank you for joining us. This has been an interesting beginning. Hope that you enjoyed it. Definitely leave your comments below. Let us know what you think, because we will read those in our next episode next week, Lord willing. If you're seeing this on a share and you want your comments to be read, make sure you're commenting on our original post so that we will see them, because if you comment on your friend Susie's share of it on Facebook, 3 times removed from where we first posted it, we won't see it. So if nothing else, just click on the YouTube video, go straight to the YouTube comments and put it there, because we'll definitely see it. And if you want to see, make sure you get notifications, you can hit the subscribe button, which will be here somewhere. I'm just going to arbitrarily say it's there where the fireman helmet is. It'll be our subscribe button. And yeah, tune in next week and have a good one.